I've been around in India. My father was in the railways, so he was traveling all over the place. I wine, dined, developed business, went global, set up collaborations, all the things that they say will make you happy, will get you success. But really, somewhere deep inside, I knew that whatever I'm doing is not the right thing to do. It is causing me stress, and when I analyzed why, it was for two reasons. One, people said that look, these spiritual gurus know a lot of stuff. So it is very serendipitous here, Shruti, that so that was when one of the masters, a gentleman by the name Chariji, he brought the idea of Tibetan Buddhism into my consciousness. He said that those Tibetans have been sitting for 1,000 years in the Himalayas. The first thing I learned was that most of them don't know English or Hindi. So
Wow.
or have a propensity to do that. It's just that we condition our kids to not explore what they already know. But if we just allow them to go in the direction of what they know, so all of us, you, I, the viewers, listeners, everybody, we're all at three levels. The body. In the last 2,500 years, what's happened is that we started giving a lot of importance to the body. This is something I call the spire pyramid. It's not just a pyramid which is even, it is like conquered the ignorance with which we exist, which then goes into deep philosophy of how everything really is empty of its self-existence. So those are the teachings that, and what are these? The conscious mind is the ego mind. The conscious mind is the one that drives us basically. After the age of 21, between 14 and 21, we're kind of experimenting with what we can get away with.
I've had the opportunity to speak with Sandeep Nath. He's a visionary leader who looks to bridge the gap between commerce and consciousness. With a rich background which includes education in IIT and IIM, Sandeep Nath spent over 25 years in the corporate world. But there was something missing. In this conversation with Sandeep, he shares insights on overcoming stress. He talks about fostering a culture of renewal, both personally and in an organizational context. Discover how he's looking to make a global impact as a thought leader, inspiring individuals to reclaim their energy and purpose. Let's welcome Sandeep Nath to Inner Habit. Hi Sandeep, welcome to Inner Habit. How are you?
Hi Shruti, thank you for having this podcast, Inner Habit. I mean, you've chosen the two words that are closest to my heart, inner and habit. Let's see how this goes. Awesome.
Yeah, I know. And your podcast, I think, is called Inner Power, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, and my book is all about habits. So there you are.
That's true. That's true. So it's really interesting because when I did contact you, that's the first thing I thought of as well. It's like, he's got his, podcast called Inner Power. And he's talking about the 30 habits in his book. So I'm going to try and get in touch with him and see how it goes.
And thank you for getting in touch. That was so awesome. Thanks a lot.
No worries. Look, I guess for me, it was to understand more about you in this podcast. And I'm so sure that people are going to actually get a different perspective to consciousness and also your book, which talks about habits. I think people need to have a better understanding of how habits actually make a lot of their lives, basically, or their days, and how they can change that. So I'm so excited you're here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No worries. Look, the first question I have is, tell us a little bit about you. Where did you grow up, your childhood?
All right. So I've been around in India. My father was in the railways, so he was traveling all over the place. And so I did my initial schooling in a number of schools. And when I came to middle school, then my dad thought that it's better that we stabilize him somewhere. So I was with my grandparents in Delhi. And that's where I grew up, so to say. And then I went for my engineering and came back to Delhi, was working here in sales, in advertising. And that was because, engineering didn't make any sense to me. So I moved out of engineering immediately. But after a while, even advertising and the concept of working for somebody else stopped making sense. So I moved out and I went to Hyderabad, which is where my parents had moved by that time. And I loved the place. And I loved the people and I loved the weather. And so I settled down there. I started a consulting company, and we were into brand strategy. So that was the early part of my career, and what sort of shaped my decisions till the time that I started questioning my own decisions. But that's a later story, I guess.
Right. So you actually started what we call a brand advertising agency. Is that correct?
Yeah, we were more into internal and external communications, culture building, and stuff like that.
Right, right. So looking at organizations, culture building, look at the policies, procedures, how to keep people happy, that kind of stuff, eh?
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Awesome. That kind of stuff. That's really good. So tell me, when did you actually transition from being in the consultancy and leaving that consultancy to actually exploring human consciousness and energy?
That's an interesting question there, because that's what happened. What I thought was that I've done all the right things, like all typical Indian middle class kids do. They get a good education. Some of the ambitious ones get into entrepreneurship. I set up a company. I even got a management degree from an IIM. I was an adjunct professor. In fact, I was teaching first, and then I realized that my introduction wasn't looking so good. So I did this executive management program from an IIM. And just for the bio, it didn't help very much because my consulting company was doing very well anyway. I became the president of the Rotary, and I wined, dined, developed business, went global, set up collaborations, all the things that they say will make you happy, will get you success. But Shruti, somewhere deep inside, I knew that whatever I'm doing is not the right thing to do. Now, what I mean by right thing is it is causing me stress. It is causing me stress, and when I analyzed why, it was for two reasons. One, it appeared to me that I am doing what I'm conditioned to do, and that doesn't sort of appeal to me. I feel I am more avant-garde, but I'm not utilizing any of that feeling that I get from somewhere, I don't know where. And the other was that what my clients were doing, and these are very large companies into, let's say, convenience foods for one of them. And I was marketing to the new generation that it's very cool and convenient and even healthy to have these kind of snacks, which I knew inside it wasn't. And then again, we were addressing the 20-year-olds at that time. And I'm talking about the early 2000s at this time. So they were all middle managers and senior managers now. But we were talking about joining the business process outsourcing companies, the BPOs. A lot of my clients were in that segment and giving very good salaries, creating a great, happy atmosphere, like you said. But what were they doing? They were working on the wrong side of the circadian rhythm. They were working like clerks, where they had huge potential and entrepreneurial potential, or even otherwise. And I thought that all of that talent was being kind of wasted in addressing somebody's credit card problem or somebody's insurance claim. Not that those things are not important, but is that how we're designing our systems? Can we design systems that these problems don't exist? Is the purpose of our lives to address problems that need not have existed in the first place? Those kind of questions came. So when you take the leap of, how did you get into working with energy and consciousness? But when it irks your own consciousness, am I doing the right thing? Am I investing my life in a direction that is helping people change? And the answer is no. Then it gets you wondering. It gets you stressed. It gets you challenging the decisions you've made. And so I didn't find any answers. Now, I had done all that IIM thing, and they didn't have the answers. So people said that, look, these spiritual gurus know a lot of stuff. So it is very serendipitous here, Shruti, that I was in Hyderabad, which is kind of the center of a lot of these high energy places where you have very esteemed masters. And I was very fortunate to get an audience with several of them. So having met them, having learned from them over about 4 or 5 years between 2005 and 10, I got an understanding that, man, we've got some answers over here. I started feeling better about myself, but I still didn't know what are we doing and why are we doing it. So that was when one of the masters, a gentleman by the name Chariji, he brought the idea of Tibetan Buddhism into my consciousness. He said that those Tibetans have been sitting for 1,000 years in the Himalayas, doing something which has connected them very deeply with energy. So if you want to explore what drives us, what drives our energetic consciousness, our at a base level, those guys would be able to direct.
So you took the leap of faith and traveled to the Himalayas.
What I did in 2010 was I handed my company over to the other directors and I went off to the Himalayas. In fact, that's also a very interesting story because way back when I was in college, we had, my parents and I, we had gone for a trip to a little known monastery in Sikkim. It's called Rumtek. And that was a pleasure trip, we were just exploring the state of Sikkim, beautiful state. But when I was in that monastery, and this was like almost 25 years before the time we just spoke of, so mid 80s, something gave me a sense that I've got to be back here. And so when Chariji said Tibetan lamas, I said, I know that one. I know where to go. So I headed straight for Rumtek, which is the international headquarters of the Karmapa. I learned later. But it's a little pleasant monastery which had sort of called me. And it took me 25 years of going through the motions and samsara to finally get back over there.
Okay. And what did you learn when you were out in the Himalayas? Tell us a little bit about your day in the mountains.
All right. So let's be clear. I wasn't staying in caves and stuff like that. So it's not like outright in the mountains. I was staying in the monastery campus. Not a very large monastery, but a very small room I had to myself. And we had this kind of cafeteria sort of place. So I wasn't eating with the monks as such, but I was able to interact with them and learn from them. And what the first thing I learned was that most of them don't know English or Hindi. So
Wow.
so that was a little upsetting. But one of them knew, 3-4 of them knew English pretty well. And one of them who became a very dear friend, he guided me to the library where we had the complete works of Chogyam Trungpa, who's a monk who'd taken Buddhist wisdom to the West. So his entire series of talks and books were there in the library. So that was a great way to spend time, just absorbing it from the perspective that makes sense to a completely uninitiated person like a Westerner. And I started writing over there also. My first book, I had penned it there. And interestingly, while I was there, a couple of very interesting things happened. I mean, we're going game for stories and stuff, right?
Yeah, of course, go for it.
Cool. So one of the things that happened was that after I was there for about a month, I had a couple of guys knocking at my door. And I opened the door and I found a couple of rough-looking guys over there. They said that we are here from the CBI. That's the Central Bureau of Investigation in India, like the FBI in the US. I said, okay, like, what did I do? so, for those of you who have a backstory of the Karmapa and this being the international headquarters, there was this tension between India and China about who's the real Karmapa. And the Karmapa wasn't allowed to stay in his own monastery while I was there. In fact, he hasn't been staying there since 1980. So for many, many years. Even when I was there the first time, he wasn't there. But by now, that should have been resolved, but it wasn't. So these guys came to find out why an Indian is here in a monastery for anything more than 24 hours. So, they gave me the grace of 29 more days, but no Indian stays here for like more than 3-4 hours. What have you been doing here? And so, like you asked, Shruti, I had to explain what I'm doing here my whole day, reading, writing, and learning Tibetan and stuff like that. But that was crazy. And that was also when, there was another couple of people who had come from Mexico and Russia and various places. I mean, the foreigners come, they stay a month, they stay 2 months, nobody has problems. But Indians never stay there. Nobody does that. At least in 2010, nobody did that. So then these other ladies, the Russian and the Mexican, they told me that evening when we were chatting, that these guys have been making inquiries for the last week. They asked us, they asked people in the mess, they asked monks, and that is interesting. And what is also interesting was that one of these two ladies, the one from Mexico, she had been, she had come from Nepal, and she'd been kind of dogged by the youth around, because when they discover that's a beautiful looking woman and she's single, then and more than the general youth, even the young monks And that was troubling her because she didn't want to be the cause of their karma, even the mental karma going bad, because they're not supposed to get distracted and stuff. So, but she was a Buddhist, she was a practitioner, and she had come all the way from Mexico just to be around in the monasteries and be with the gurus and learn from there and all that. And so, somewhere while I was staying there, they made their way down from Nepal. And the first day that she came, I didn't know that, but she'd gone up to the place where the Karmapa used to be, and they have a sanctum sanctotum there. She had a heart to heart with him. She sort of followed the Karmapa since almost 10 years by that time. And so she was coming to his house, so to say, for the first time. And she said, "Look, boss, I've got a problem. And I'm looking for somebody who's like, who likes to travel and who's sort of available to be with me, and who's sort of also Buddhist, and we have common interests and stuff like that." And then this Karmapa Sanctum Sanctorum is on the third floor of that monastery. And then after she'd finished her chat, she looked out the window, and then she saw a guy who was pacing up and down the driveway, looking at some notes and doing whatever he was doing. So the next day morning, this lady is having breakfast, and this guy walks in, and while she's having breakfast, there are these little lamas who are also in the cafeteria, and she's speaking to them in Tibetan. And this guy comes and says, "Oh, so you speak their language?" Because this guy knew how difficult Tibetan is. And that was the first line that guy, who I identify as myself, said to that woman. And 3 years from then, they were married. So that's how I met my wife.
Oh, wow.
So that was a very important visit to the monastery also. What was I doing there?
Oh. So you met your wife at the monastery. She practiced Tibetan Buddhism. So you both had something in common there.
We had a lot in common. We figured later. But that's serendipitous. The point was that we were both at the same place at the same time with the same, like the Russian friend of hers said, same soap opera. So we'd been through a lot of similar stuff in life, and we also had similar plans for the future, because both of us were very interested in the energy part of Tibetan Buddhism and how that manifests in the death experience and in how we live lives. So, in case I've lost some of our viewers and listeners, let me bring it back to habits, because they're watching the Inner Habit show here. And, you said something very interesting at the beginning of this recording, that habits determine how we live our life. And I would like to add to that, for all your future, whatever, discourses on this subject, that they just don't add to life. They define how we live our next, right? So that's the importance of habits, because habits work today in influencing the people that we can influence, like our kids or our nephews, nieces, people in school and wherever. They see us doing certain things, getting certain results from those habits, they follow. But ourselves, when we get habituated to something, that's the way we act, right? Action.
That's right.
What's the Sanskrit word for action?
Karma.
So that is the karma that we create. Now, what we've got in Vedic philosophy, as well as which was distilled into Buddhist philosophy, is this concept of a karmic mind stream that carries over, right? So this karmic mind stream is that little bit of consciousness that connects us life to life, which is what explains prodigies, which is what explains people who are really small but can speak multiple languages or have a propensity to do that. It's just that we condition our kids to not explore what they already know. But if we just allow them to go in the direction of what they know, we would find prodigies. We would find that they are building on the old wisdom. Now, what is that old wisdom? That old wisdom is what they were habituated to. So these highly recognized lamas that we have, some of them are called Rinpoches. You've come across this word, Rinpoche. And a Rinpoche is a person who is, the word Rinpoche in Tibetan means precious. So a Rinpoche is so precious because he has mastered the ability to navigate between lives. And so a person would tell their existing coterie of or inner circle of lamas where to find them as kids. And it takes about 2-3 years to do that. By that time, the person is reborn, and then these people, there are documentaries on this on YouTube where they recognize the person, and the person is really small, of course, 2-3 years old, but they recognize the malas and the things that they used to, they can pick out those things. So there is an established connection that yes, this person has reincarnated this way. And that is why that wisdom of habits is accumulated over multiple lives. So the Dalai Lama, for instance, is called the 14th Dalai Lama because he's the 14th mind stream that's arisen on this planet in the last 600-700 years. He's the 17th karma.
Wow.
So the karma, in fact, predates the Dalai Lama. But the Dalai Lama used to be the king of Tibet, and he's the head of the spiritual schools. So he's a very popular figure, very wise. Not some wisdom that you and I can expect in this lifetime, but in 14 probably yes.
So tell me, when we speak about Tibetan Buddhism and Buddhism, now we know that Buddhism has certain philosophies. So for example, there's the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, or the Noble Eightfold Path. I'm assuming that is also followed in Tibetan Buddhism, but there is more to Tibetan Buddhism than just following the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Paths. What is there, or what can you learn in addition to these in Tibetan Buddhism?
Great question. So let's look at when the Buddha was around. He spoke because he was asked to share what happened, and he thought initially he didn't want to, but then he thought, okay, let me propagate this and help people realize. Because what he found, put very very basic, very simply, which is what I sort of do in the way I go about things like the books I've written and all. Get it down to something that are really basic and easy to relate with. So all of us, you, I, the viewers, listeners, everybody, we're all at 3 levels: the body, the mind, and the spirit.
One question. The spirit is the soul in essence, right? It's the same thing?
Nomenclature. Let's just call it energy. All right. So it's a energy form, right? Which could then become a mind stream and go off in your next life. What he discovered was that this body, mind, and spirit play an equal role. So Shruti, what we got to understand is that we are at 3 levels: the body, the mind, and the spirit. All of us. And in the times of the Buddha, the spirit or energy had the same weightage as the mind and the body. In the last 2,500 years, what's happened is that we started giving a lot of importance to the body. This is something I call the spire pyramid. It's not just a pyramid which is even. It is like this, where the largest part is the body at the bottom. We're concerned with it all the time. We get our pedicures, manicures, we do our surgeries, we put band-aids, whatever, we know what to do. But the connection with the mind is somewhere in the middle, which is much less. We know we are happy, we know we are sad, but you can't put a band-aid on your anger, for example, right? So that's the loss of connection that we have, which is the sad reality. And the least is at the top of the spire, where we really don't know much about energy. But the fact is that energy is our spirit. If you're in high spirits, anything is possible. If you're in low spirits, probably depressed. So spirit drives us. It drives our habits, it drives our body and mind. But our connection is lost. So what the Buddha and those times we were operating on was, it wasn't a spire like that, it was a cylinder like this. Equal weightage with energy, mind, and body. And that's what made those people so sharp and so capable that for the next 400 years, they remembered everything that they'd asked the Buddha to teach them. And it was only after 400-500 years that they started writing this down. Now, why I gave you that was 2 reasons. One, that if we can get back our spirit connection, which happens through our habits, which is what renewal is about, we can become a completely transformed society energetically. We can start operating at a different level of consciousness altogether. But what it also what also emerges from this is that when we started writing things down, then there was a difference of opinion in interpreting what exactly he said. So there was a school of people who felt that, look, he's shown us the example. We are capable of self-awakening. Let us work on ourselves and awaken through disciplines, through habits. Okay. So that is the Vinaya practices, and pretty aligned with yogic practices, all right? But high level of habits and disciplines over there. This is what's called the Theravada school. It was initially called the Hinayana, but the Theravadas, they work on themselves.
Yeah.
Then we had this Mahayana school. Now the Mahayana interpretation was, look, boss, he didn't do it for himself. He did it so that all of us could be awakened, right? All of us know something more than we did thanks to his teachings. And so many of us have been awakened and enlightened. When you have that sort of cylindrical energy connection, getting enlightened is pretty easy. And there were so many enlightened masters in those times. All the way up to the 5th, 6th centuries, Nagarjuna and people in the Nalanda school and all that. So that's what the basis of Mahayana was, which is Maha, greater, because it's for the greater good. So the premise was that you get enlightened if you work for the benefit of all sentient beings. Now this Mahayana doctrine went over to Tibet, and it was also influenced by their existing tantric practices and a very important master who's called the precious master of masters, the Guru Rinpoche. Okay, so he is Rinpoche precious and Guru. So he is the only Guru Rinpoche, who evidently, as the story goes, was born out of a lotus. So he was not born from a mother's womb. He was found on a lotus. And so he's also called Padma Sambhava, which means possible over a lotus. And Guru Padma Sambhava was evidently the next incarnation of the Buddha, to whom this question had been asked, that how do you prepare for death? Because it is your liberation, nirvana and all that stuff lies after you die, right? So that's one of those silly questions which Buddha said, I cannot answer because I've also been born out of a womb. So that's how the story goes. When I come outside a womb, I will answer it. And therefore, Padma Sambhava, a greatly accomplished master, developed and propagated what's called Vajrayana or Tantrayana or Tibetan Buddhism. So all the precepts are the same. It all starts from the Four Noble Truths and moves into how you live your life to accomplish the nirvana that the Four Noble Truths promise, if you can keep your desires in check. So, the truths are simply that there is suffering in the world. And Buddhism starts with that very sorry state of everything, is calling a spade a spade. Look, God's suffering. Don't give a crap about happiness. There is suffering. If you get too happy about things, also you will suffer. I give you 6 chocolates, that's the end of it. Okay. And if you have those 6 happily, I'll give you another 6, and then we'll see your expression. So there is always suffering. But the suffering has a cause, and the cause is this desire that you want more chocolates and all. And the way to eliminate that is by following the Eightfold Path, because then once you eliminated desire, attachment, ego, then you have conquered the ignorance with which we exist, which then goes into deep philosophy of how everything really is empty of its self-existence. So those are the teachings that came into the Tibetan part of it, very strongly focused on between lives, the death experience, and the emptiness of our existence. So that's what differentiates it. But in my book, The Emptiness of Success, which was bringing the concepts that my earlier book, Renewal, what the habits we had in renewal, which are called the renewalism habits. Well, how do you relate with them? So my publisher said that, look, we need a bridge book over here, which would speak to the senior young executives, the millennials, the ones who were in their 20s in 2000, who are now the CEOs and the successful people in their 40s, 38, 40 types. Those are the ones who have now got the position where they can influence their corporate cultures, but they don't know how to, because there isn't a habits pattern that they can apply to it to recall and renew their organizations with the energy that we've known about in ancient wisdom, in Buddhist philosophy, in yogic philosophy, in Vedic philosophy. So bringing that to be understood, renewal. Okay, this is the book. This is renewal, and the byline of this book is your unexpected role in saving the planet. So it's your role in saving the planet because it's your habits. But the next book is The Emptiness of Success, and here the byline is how the presence of absence, that's a duality in itself. How that, when you realize that through that emptiness, which is a little different from the emptiness I felt in 2005, that what am I doing? This is all hollow. It's a little deeper than that. But how connecting with that brings you fulfillment, freedom, and flow. So how you get into that flow state where things happen effortlessly for you because you've connected with some very deep wisdom, which you are able to apply practically through what you do day to day, and what your teams can do day to day, and what your organizations can do as a way of a renewalist culture. So that's what the emptiness of success is taking across to companies today, to bring this renewalist culture into a reality everywhere.
Okay, so let's then, this is good segue into your first book, Renewal. You mention in that first book that the world is 30 habits away from renewal. Can you please explain what you mean by this?
Okay, so this book, I have my name on it, but it's not written by me. It's written by a character who introduces himself a few pages into the book, and he introduces himself as Guru Pranachandra. Now, I'll tell you how it happened. I was sitting in Mexico with not much to do in 2019, November, and suddenly this word renewal came to my mind. And my wife was kind of occupied with the house, and she was refurbishing. So, like I said, I didn't have much to do. I had my computer, and suddenly the word renewal came and I started writing. And Shruti, I didn't know what I was writing, but I just started writing. And the first line of this book is something about Shekhar and he knowing his deadlines and that his insurance was up for renewal. And I didn't know where I was going with this. In the next 40 days, I had 240 pages out. I didn't know what I was writing. It was only in early January when I was reading what was already on the computer and making sense of it, I found that I have been dictated by this Guru Pranachandra habits for self-renewal, which is the alignment of body, mind, and spirit. Habits for symbiotic renewal, which is, and 10 habits each, mind you. I wouldn't have got that math right if I had been programmed for it. 10 habits for symbiotic renewal, which is about renewing our relations with others and with the planet. And 10 habits for systemic renewal, which is about renewing systems which have stopped serving us but been so busy that we haven't noticed. And that's when I was editing COVID hit. And I found that a lot of these habits were being forced upon us, let's say. For example, it all starts with mindfulness. Unless you're mindful, you can't change a habit. And we started to be forced into being mindful about masks and physical distancing and hygiene and stuff. Symbiotic renewal, one of those things is like about minimalism, about working with the planet, working with others, And we discovered that we don't need the malls anymore. We don't need the cinema halls. We don't need the popcorn. We can still survive. Symbiotic renewal, one of the habits is about telecommuting. How, real estate is just going up unnecessarily. We're creating more problems than we're solving, which was my problem in 2005, which is where I started with solutions. So renewal, and especially systemic renewal, to do with the way our educational conditioning is and systems like that, all these are serendipitously the answer to the questions I had, for which I had no answers. And so this book came out as an answer to all of that. And I say this in the context of your question, I think, but I've forgotten your question.
You mentioned in your book, Renewal, that the world is 30 habits away from renewal.
So that's these 10 habits, which self-structured. And if we can just do these 30 things, which is not a lot because it is in different compartments, and the self-renewal is just about how you live your life from the time you wake up to the time you go to sleep again. And symbiotic renewal is about simple things like carrying a plastic bag, for example. So you reduce carrying a bag, so you reduce the plastic footprint on the planet as a lay consumer, because you just go out of the house and you realize that suddenly you swung into a shop and suddenly you picked up something. And you know that that's going to happen, and stuff like that. So of course, the habit is about carrying your stuff, which is also about carrying responsibility for your own health and for your own healing, and going back into practices that would reduce our dependence on medicines and all of that. Everything has side effects, right? Everything has consequences. And the Buddhist path is about acknowledging the causes and conditions that create karma, that create habits that prevent us from liberation. So let's be a more truly liberated society, because we worked on these basic habits of self-symbiotic and systemic renewal. Those are the 30 habits that that we can start working on.
Thank you for that. So what you mentioned a couple of key habits, within each section of the book, and I believe the book is broken down into 3 different sections, right? Where you talk about the mindfulness, and then you talk about the symbiotic, and then the 3rd section as well. So what, in your view, are the key habits that enhance human consciousness in your view?
So the key is only one, and that is mindfulness, because it takes that awareness, that remembering of what we're doing, to be able to change it or replace it with something else. So what is mindfulness? Now, this is very important to understand, because it's got nothing to do with the brain. It's got nothing to do with the mind as we understand, or just being aware. And so people are obsessively, compulsively aware of things, that okay, I've got to focus on this, and that stresses people out. No. Mindfulness comes from, you remember that there's a sign that you read on a low ceiling or on a staircase, where they give you a cautionary notice. It says, mind your head, right? And what does that mean? That means remember that you have a head, right? Otherwise, you're going to knock into the stairway or whatever. So that's where the mindfulness comes from. It comes from remembering. Remember what you're doing. Now, when we say be mindful of your mask, remember to wear your mask before going out. That's what the diktat was in 2020. So being mindful means to bring into your active memory what it is that you're working on, doing, saying. And if you have the say, do, be harmony, you're mindful of what you're saying is in alignment with what you're doing, is in alignment with what you feel, right? So unless you're mindful, unless you're aligning this trinity, you are quite honestly not going anywhere. So so it starts with that. That's the key. And then let me share with the viewers what is the way of creating or replacing a habit. So again, that happens at 3 levels. It's all trinities. In fact, the emptiness of success is all about trinities. And the beauty is to understand that unless you have found a trinity to something, you've not understood the thing totally. So for example, here we have a trinity of the fulfillment, freedom, and flow. Fulfillment is a pretty physical thing, freedom is a pretty mental thing, and flow is a spiritual thing, so the body, mind, and spirit. For example, where we talk about space and time. Now, in chapter 1 of that book itself, and I know I'm digressing, but this is very interesting because it was very interesting to me. Emptiness of Success, I wrote. So I was like really talking to myself while expounding whatever we have in this. I was saying there's something incomplete about space and time. Because space is physical, body. Time is a mental construct. Depending on which side of the bathroom you are, the time can be different. Or which gender you are, the time can be different. 5 minutes for a female is very different from 5 minutes for a male. And so on and so forth. So it's a mental construct. So what's the spiritual construct? What's the 3rd level? And that's something that we explore in the 1st chapter of the book. And that we explore because we understand mindfulness. Because when we are mindful, what we do is that we change the possibility of the outcome. So when you have that alignment inside, that's what I call inner power, and that's why I style myself as an inner power coach. Bringing your body, mind, spirit alignment, that gives you power, and that power gives you that mindfulness of being able to know what you're saying, doing, and being at any time, being able to understand what your conscious, subconscious, and unconscious minds, how they are responding, and how your habits are being shaped as a consequence. So you can change your outer reality with your inner power. And give you an example, if I was to complete this sentence in any way, I could do it just because of my mindfulness, my remembering of what it is I'm saying between words or between phrases or between sentences. Or I could just go on saying or this or that, because every time I'm forming some new reality of what comes on to the show. There are different words coming out of the show based on how mindful I am of what my context is. And like, for example, a little while ago where you asked me about the 30 habits and I talked to you about the 10-10-10, and then I lost awareness. I was not remembering what the question was. Why did I start talking about these 10-10-10? I was not mindful at that time. So the outer reality of the show changed. Suddenly you got this edit to happen, or if you leave it like that, I'm going to look like a goof, and that's perfectly fine. But but that's where mindfulness controls outcomes, which is what operates at the energy level. So for those of you who are going to be curious about what this first chapter itself is about, space time in the Trinity, the third thing is possibility, because energy creates possibilities, and your mindful connection with energies and aligning them is what changes possibilities. So this is still to come up in a lot of scientific measurement, because science only measures length, breadth, height, and past, present, future. We don't have those things for possibility until more people read this book, and then we will. But I've got that Trinity going. So habits are formed also on the Trinity of the conscious, subconscious, and unconscious minds. And what are these? The conscious mind is the ego mind. The conscious mind is the one that drives us, basically. After the age of 21, between 14 and 21, we're kind of experimenting with what we can get away with. So those of you readers, listeners, viewers who have kids who are teenagers, that's why they're so rebellious, because they're just experimenting with how much they can get away with, right? And they're forming their belief systems at that point that, okay, I can get away with this. So that translates into various other things that happen in their lives. And that's the limiting beliefs that they have formed by the time they're 21, which are set in the conscious mind, because that's what's driving them thereafter on autopilot. The subconscious mind is the feeling mind, the one where we've stored our emotions, and between the age of 0 to 7 is when this is most dominant, which again agrees with Dr. Gardner and various other philosophies of very psychological findings of how we pack our emotional selves in that first 7 years of our lives. And that's why what happens when the child is thrown up and you catch the child, and then the child is absolutely scared of what's happened. Like suddenly they're up in the air, but then when they come down and then they see the person who's thrown them up smiling and laughing, then they adopt the monkey behavior and they also smile and laugh, and we think that, all right, we're making the child really happy. But the child is just obliging you, actually, because you scared the shit out of them. But you don't know. You would rather go with what the child's propensity is, like those little llamas do, and build on those propensities and build on that wisdom bank that they're already coming with. But that's one of the self-renewal habits of spending time with the younger persons, because there's so much of perspective that they can give us that we refuse to take, because we want to condition them into doing certain things. So that's the subconscious mind, and the unconscious mind is the one that we're born with before age 0. That's the karmic mind stream. So that's coming in to not only drive your organs, your heartbeats, whether you like it or not, your lungs, they take in the air, and all of that happens. The blood knows where to go, and everything happens. But you also have these imprints, the karmic imprints, which don't really define your life, but they create important points in your life where you have certain karmic redemptions, let's say, and they also have a veto power. So if something is going to not serve you, because the unconscious mind, the purpose is to protect you. It's got to do the things that make sure that you're alive and sustained. So whether it's a heartbeat or it is something that a habit you can't get rid of, it's probably, if you conquered the conscious and the subconscious mind, it's probably a purification required at the unconscious level, at the karmic level. So you've got to tell the conscious mind what's to be done. That responds to the what question and when question. So let's say it happened during the lockdowns. Suddenly I found that I was in charge of washing the dishes. So I've never washed the dishes, right? So when do I wash the dishes? And stuff like that. Well, dishes were easy. It was easy to wash them. I was also in charge of watering the plants. When do I water the plants, right? There's no cue for that. So what was clear at water the plants? But I had to build that between my having my energy drink and my sitting for breakfast. All right. So those are the two existing habits. So I knew when to. So then the plants were likely to get watered, provided I didn't have any subconscious barriers to it. Like maybe I saw a horror movie where the plant comes and gobbles up the kid, which I did in fact, but I got over it. But I just remembered that now. So I wouldn't go close to plants or wouldn't want to, because that's an imprint that I have which I haven't cleared. Subconscious needs to understand why and how. So the why and how for me were very easy. That my wife said so that's why. She's not going to do it. I know how to do it. I just got to get myself in the balcony and with the water source and that. So there is no resistance coming from deep down. And so the plants got watered. We had a very nice time. The dishes also got washed and everything happened. But this is what I want to bring across to you, that you think of the what and when for the conscious mind and the why and how for the unconscious mind, subconscious mind, and then just check in with the unconscious mind if it's got no veto to it. Because if it does, then you probably need to have a one-on-one session with me, or maybe you read The Emptiness of Success or whatever, and we clear you out karmically. So that's how we form habits, and that's how we need to have this alignment. And moving forward, that helps in how we are determining the next life as well.
Great. You mentioned that your first book, Renewal, was written, that you wrote the words and you didn't know that the words were coming out, and that it was actually a guru who came to you in the form of energy. And that's how you were able to write that book. Tell me, who is that guru? I mean, if he was coming in a form of energy, was he there in the previous life and then he came to you? I'm just trying to understand that.
Great question. So I think this Guru Pranachandra is the composite of all my teachers. And like I mentioned, I've been very fortunate to have learned from some of the best Vedic masters, including Sai Baba, who was alive then, and Sri and Shariji and various others. And then from Karmapa, from Dalai Lama, from various Rinpoches, and from Taoist masters, from Zen masters. And I think if I am to put all that ancient Oriental wisdom together in the embodiment of somebody who can bring it to us and make sense of it in the modern world that we are in, the corporate world I come from, then it's Guru Pranachandra. Now, I knew that habits are important. I knew that we have a link between habits and consciousness. I knew that like in 2010 itself. But I didn't know that has a way of solving the problem I had in 2005 of why are we designing our systems with such low consciousness that we have to get 20-year-olds to work for credit card back offices? Why do we... Now we're talking about sustainability. Now we're talking about DEI. We're talking about things because we've seen the stress over the last 20 years. We've seen the number of hospitals and hospitalization increasing, which is abnormal. We have a Gen Z coming in, which is kind of open to taking charge and exploring different things, going the way that is experiential. And so we are just right for this solution to be adopted, which is in the form of a package called Renewal, which is, like you said, 30 habits, which we're creating a global wisdom workforce to take these habits in that way that they can bring about that change in companies. So a certified renewalist of the global wisdom workforce would be able to take this out, thousands and thousands of them around the world over this decade. That's the path I'm on.
Yes, I've seen the website, the renewalism you call it.
Renewalism.com. And there's a little piece about Guru Pranachandra in that website, in the page of who we are. And there's also the core team that's guiding this global wisdom workforce, and we're working together on that. And we're just going to start off this training of the first cohorts as we get into redefining cultures in companies. So there's a lot on renewalism.com. And speaking of Guru Pranachandra again, he played an immense role in those 40 days when everything was dictated to me. But he evidently is taking charge of all subconscious decisions and unconscious decisions on renewalism even today. So it happened last week. Just this week, Monday or sometime, that one of the coaches in the speaking community, which I'm a part of, they were talking about the use of color and branding. and how colors are very important in sending out subliminal messages. And then they presented a color chart in which the color blue is what stands for dependability and trust, and the color green is what stands for nature, alignment with nature, and health, well-being. And when some 4-5 months ago we had defined the color palette of renewalism, it was blue and green, and those very shades that she put out in her palette. So I was saying, man, we could have taken orange or anything, but we didn't. So there you are.
Thank you for telling me about the guru that helped you write this beautiful book that you've done, Renewal. How can organizations benefit from the principle of renewalism?
Fantastic. So what are the problems plaguing organizations today? We're looking at people problems, hiring, retention, attrition, attracting the right talent, getting them to engage, getting them to feel a part of the organization, taking ownership, right? That's one. Second is with the advent of technology and what you can leave to AI, what you can use data for, how you interpret technology, how you interpret data, how you interpret AI, how you use and build on these systems. That is how you define your processes, which will take you to deliver whatever you want to deliver. So that's the process aspect of your delivery. And the third problem that is become even more of a problem now, with people realizing that they have to prepare for setbacks like COVID, is because this is not the last one. And it's beyond disaster management now. It's complete game change. You pull the carpet out from under you, and then what do you do? So it's about what has been driving you, that made you do what you're doing, that you will continue doing regardless of what tools you have to do it. So that's purpose. And if you revisit your purpose as an organization and align that purpose down to every KPI, key performance indicator of every individual, then the people are aligned with the processes, are aligned with the purpose. And that alignment is what renewal brings about. Why? Because that alignment is the alignment of people, which is the self, processes, which are systems, systemic renewal, and symbiotic renewal is about purpose, how we affect others, why we're doing what we're doing. At another level of this trinity, people are the body of an organization, processes are the mind of an organization that drive it, and purpose is the driving spirit of the organization. So aligning body, mind, spirit, we already understand, is the best way to remove stress. And if you want to remove organizational stress, aligning people, purpose, process is where this comes together. And how we do it, like I said, renewal, my publisher said, was a little preachy, because it's got all this gyan about mindfulness and nature and what we need to connect with, and then how we need to do it individually and symbiotically and systemically. But she used the word preachy. So that's where my publisher brought in the emptiness of success as the way for people to understand this. And Guru Pranachandra surfaced again in this book, but this time is by design, because it's again a dialogue between Shekhar, who's the guy who was having a problem, the first line of renewal, that he knew his deadlines and his insurance renewal was coming up. So it's that Shekhar and this Guru Pranachandra, who he had grown to know over the years, have this dialogue in 2008, and that's the emptiness of success. So this book is pretty much like the book The Courage to Be Disliked, or Power of the Warrior, Dan Millman. So books like that, where you have a conversation between two people, The Alchemist, for example, and where the protagonist is guided. And so Shekhar is guided, and Shekhar is the CEO. And why 2008 is because Shekhar was like today's CEOs, the millennial senior executives, are where Shekhar would have been in 2008 as a 35-year-old. Also because 2008 is around the time when I started understanding that, man, this is what is the cause of our stress, and I was experiencing it myself, and how bringing that into alignment. And also importantly, because we want to bring renewal habits into the university and the high school level, so that unlike you and me, at least this generation which is graduating today is better prepared for the stresses that they're going to face. And if they have the habits to face that today, they would be able to eliminate the causes that cause it to arise. These kids, and I'll just finish with this, they in 2008, which is 16 years ago, were in that 0 to 7 age bracket. And that's when they were collecting their impressions, and suddenly they will reconnect with the circumstances and what's going on in the emptiness of success and redraw their trajectory.
I'm so with you. I feel that the education system currently does not provide children the knowledge that they need about different habits, about how to live their lives outside in society, and how to balance the stress. That is never taught. What is taught in the education system is this is your exam, you've got to do it, you've got to pass it, but then the kid is stressed already, but they don't know how to manage it. So when you get into an exam, you're already nervous. And I'm experiencing this with my own niece who gets into an exam and she gets so flustered because she doesn't know how to deal with that stress or that anxiety that comes with it, right? And if only she understood exactly what you're saying, the practice of mindfulness also, it would help her actually sort of manage it so much better that she's able to perform much better in class and in school or in exams.
And it is for the schools to create that ecosystem, because the kids are stressed because the teachers are stressed. The teachers don't know how to handle the syllabus and the curriculum and all of that. And that has a ripple effect, So what we want to do is bring it into a systemic change. And I have an article on the renewalism.com blog about how renewal habits can facilitate. In India, at least, we have a new education policy. So the NEP was written in 2020. It's still being in early stages of implementation. So it's a very visionary document. It's a big outline of how teaching should be more experiential and stuff like that. It doesn't say how you do it. So it's an interesting post that we've written. And we are looking for an audience with people who can make those changes in the national education policy and incorporate these habits as part of the curriculum itself. You have a little 30 seconds of mindful breathing at the start of every period, and you will extract more from that period. Kids will be more focused in that period.
Yes, very true.
And every teacher can do that.
Indeed, that's so true. So tell me, I'm just going back to the organizational side of things a little bit. What sort of success have you had with your teachings, I suppose I should say, or your knowledge that you've accumulated over the 20 odd years? Can you give us a success story for an organization that you worked with have had?
Great question. And the answer is, I wish. The reason is that, personally, between 2016 and 2020, my wife and I we were doing a lot of B2C programs, open workshops. So that measurability was not there, but people were developing enough power. They were seeing how it would go. And then that continued through the lockdowns. But 2023 is when I realized that, look, we've got to take this in the form of movement and bring it to companies. And so when I started doing that, we started doing work with them. But we were doing work which I realized a year and a half later was satisfying the checklists that the HR managers or the learning and development people had to mark off. They had to do a mindfulness workshop, let's say, or they had to do something on nutrition or something like that. But there was no strategy around this. So that's where early to 2024 is in the first quarter, we got together a core group. We planned this whole thing out, and we said that, look, we're going to position renewalism only at the CEO and board level to create conscious cultures. Because unless an organization is willing to give us 3 years, they're not having the cultural transformation. And unless they give us 6 months and not a checklist program, but a 6-month journey, we're not going to be able to show them empirical data from their own organization of how sickness and absenteeism has dropped by 73%, how engagement and productivity has gone up by 85% in their own organizations, in their test groups. So we haven't got to 6 months yet with any organization, but we, like I said, the other part of this is who's going to facilitate all that. Sandeep Nath's not going to do all the workshops, right? So that's why the Global Wisdom Workforce and all of that. So this is good timing for this podcast and this question, that if you are in the education sector or if you're in the corporate sector, we've got the solutions ready for you, and all you have to do is listen to us and start implementing.
So are these solutions only available in India, or can they be utilized?
These are designed to be worldwide, and they're designed to be executed online. So we don't need in-person workshops at all for any of the interventions that we have. The Certified Renewalist, the Global Wisdom Workforce, that also happens over a program that is executed face-to-face. It's not like you do a course which is packaged already. No, you do it with all that interaction. But once you've done it, then you, being a trainer or a coach, can take it forward with your own examples, with your own embellishments, and use that as a separate vertical to position whatever you're doing. Like, you could be a leadership trainer, but now you are not just a leadership trainer, you're also a renewalist culture builder. And that takes your leadership knowledge to a different level of incorporating in habits, thereby making it organically strong and sustainable.
Okay, now at an individual level, what advice would you give somebody who is looking to do energy work?
So yeah, that's an easy question, because we've had so many examples of people self-healing, self-empowering, feeling better, feeling lighter, less stressed over the last 8 years that we've been doing these B2C programs. And the most powerful one of them is a habit called Qi Gong. Google it, use the spelling Q-I, that's Qi, G-O-N-G, Qi Gong. So even if you write C-H-I-G-O-N-G, you'll get it, but it's Q-I-G-O-N-G, which is a Taoist practice, goes back 4,000-5,000 years, about how you use your respiration, which is where your mind sits on your breathing, so it doesn't go all over the place, so you stop the overthinking mind, along with how your body moves. So that's the movements, and I say respiration is R, movements is M, and E. So R-M-E trinity. E is energy, which you move through your visualization. So the way you do Qigong brings R, M, and E in alignment, and you need R, M, and E for anything that you do. You need to use your mind, you need to use your body, you need to empower your spirit. And if you create a habit of Qigong, then you balance and align your R, M, and E, which makes you a lot more effective in everything else that you do. So that's one of the renewalism habits also. And in fact, it's a self-renewal habit and a symbiotic renewal habit, because you can take Qigong into your workspaces, into your community. And in China, Singapore, Malaysia, a lot of the Far Eastern countries, we have people doing Qigong as a habit every day in public parks. So it's beautiful. It's not as evident in other parts of the world, but it's the one thing that people can do to align themselves and make themselves stress-free and happier.
I noticed that photograph on renewalism on your website where you were actually practicing it, I take it.
Nice. Yes, it's very empowering. Beautiful.
So what sort of projects and workshops do you have coming up that are currently exciting you? I mean, you mentioned the project where you want to take renewalism across the world, and it sounds like a fantastic program, which is something that sort of comes up in my mind as well. How can people become coaches for this, firstly, and what sort of workshops are they expected to attend?
Fantastic. A very, very relevant question, because the Global Wisdom Workforce is based on people empowering themselves as coaches. And these people would be existing coaches, existing trainers, existing teachers, even professors who would apply for it. So right now we're at the level where we are forming a cohort, the first cohort of just 20 people, and we're inviting applications. And there is a link that we can share in your description, which would take them to that page. If you don't do that, you've got to remember this, that there is renewalism.com, and on the vision page at the bottom, you will find the link to the form. So our vision is to have the Global Wisdom Workforce very, very soon, and expanding through 2025. And you read all about our vision and apply to be part of the Global Wisdom Workforce. That's an exciting project coming up. And the second exciting thing that's coming up in this quarter is the launch of our first few 6-month journeys, where we'll start showing companies the data that they would base their renewalist cultures upon.
I'm actually excited about that, and I would like to see that data. So I can't wait to see the results of that. Are you going to be putting that on the website, like Renewalism website?
I would definitely, because that's what's going to inspire other people to want that. Because who doesn't want a proven methodology to bring sickness and absenteeism down, to bring customer delight up predictably, because people know how to work with energies and create those relationships, for example. Who wouldn't? Everybody would, but nobody's got a cookie-cutter mechanism for it until they adopt renewalism habits.
Okay, so I have another question, and it's, I suppose, I don't know, in some way, I've seen this happen. You talk about BPOs and stuff, and I've seen it on a couple of occasions. the stress level that people have, and because of that stress, they get really angry with their employees. And that's quite common when I see it happening in India quite a lot. And I have to ask why the culture or the company culture in India is so like that in comparison to what I see in Australia, whereas we don't approach people like that. Obviously, we have laws, rules, and so much more. And just so you know, I'm familiar with HR because I worked in organizations where we do HR. I've been in recruitment for 15 years, for example. So I've got that knowledge with working with learning and development, the HR policies, and so on and so forth. So why is that such a big thing in India that I see that isn't common in other places?
We are angry young men. We've been brought up on Amitabh Bachchan. No, but jokes apart, if you were to ask my wife that question, because she had this observation being from Mexico, that everybody seems to be fighting. It's just the nature of our language, the way we speak in a lot of Indian tongues, including Hindi. We just speak in a pitch and in a way that makes it appear that we are angry with each other, but we're actually not. And that could be one thing. The other thing is that we don't have niceties forced upon us in the language. So, for example, we may say please and thank you a hell of a lot of times to come across as polite in English and in Spanish for that matter. But in Hindi, we hardly ever use those words. We may use thank you to some extent, but please is practically non-existent, except in notices. That's where you would come across that word kripya. Otherwise, you wouldn't. So it's just that we are a very hands-on sort of society where everybody is everybody's brother, and so you can say anything to anybody. So that's where we come from. That sort of a mindset. But I don't think we mean animosity. We don't have that much road rage, for example. We don't have that many accidents happening over here. Everything sort of flows. That's another thing I learned from a foreigner's viewpoint, that everything from the cows to the bicycles to the bikes to the scooters to the rickshaws and the buses and everything just meanders its way without people getting hit, and nobody dies. Very, very few people die compared to what happens in more advanced countries, because we sort of just flow. And I would think that this anger is part of that flow, which is not meant vindictively but meant to establish authority. Don't give me crap. So that sounds like the nature of the beast, so to say, within each one of us. But it's not like we are very vengeful in that sense. So we just go with the flow and get our work done.
Yeah, I've seen that, where the cows, the bicycles, the motorbikes, the tuk-tuks and everything work so amazingly. If we try that in Australia or any other country, it just would not work. It's amazing.
That is also a higher spirit connect, because spirit flows very subtly. But we've lost the cognition of that's what's really happening. But that's happening because it's culturally embedded for 5,000 years.
Sandeep, I really want to thank you for this conversation. It has been amazing. Trust me when I say that, because you have spoken so much about what people want to hear, particularly in this Western world. We all want to know about this unconscious, subconscious, and conscious mind and how it actually works. And you bring out some fantastic programs. So hats off to you on that. I really want to thank you. And I also want to ask people to read Renewal and his second book that's come out in July. He'll tell you the title for that, The Emptiness of Success.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And it was a delightful conversation. I have no idea where the time just flew. You had some great questions coming up, and I wish you great success with this Inner Habit podcast. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate it. I will at some stage call you back. I want to talk about your successes with organizations, and I want to understand more from you about how that coaching and the global expansion is going as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Looking forward.